Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this weekly in-depth ag forecast for Ag South Farm Credit. Now, in today's video, we're going to cover what I'm expecting to see over the next couple of weeks, which overall means quite a bit of precipitation. The pattern's very active to finish March and to start early April. But what I'm going to spend quite a bit of time doing at the very end is giving you a complete summary of all of our long-range weather forecasts, from analogs all the way to the newest model data and the stuff that just came out from the CPC. So on Thursday, we were released a new drought monitor, and what it shows us is that nearly all of Ag South territory is out of drought, save this one region right here in parts of North Carolina. Now, as you look at this map, I can tell you where it's going to be changing a lot just over the next 15 days. Right in through here in a major way, we hope, because of some pretty substantial precipitation coming through the upper Midwest. There's going to be a lot of snow dumped across the northern tier of the United States, and also we're going to watch some parts of the Midwest here really just pick up, or the Mid-South, pick up some decent moisture. This end of March timeframe is going to be kind of mission critical to a lot of growing areas in the United States. So we have to pay close attention to that. But coming back to Ag South territory, let's have a quick look at what's going on over here in parts of North Carolina, where we've really flatlined in precipitation. You see, over the last 60 days, the percent of normal precipitation in this area, some places, is almost getting down to 50%, so less than half of normal, late winter, early spring precipitation. A couple of other dry areas to take note of is this one here in the Northern Plains. Again, most of this getting filled in very quickly, but I want to talk to you a bit about the Southern Plains and what my concerns are going farther into the growing season in this region. So just keep this map in the back of your mind. I also like to compare maps like this to historical past, and so we always go to these statistics, right? So this is by climate reporting district, where things currently sit in terms of precipitation ranks since February 1st. So again, some holes about to get filled in here, and the same one with North Carolina, where we do have some of these climate reporting districts kind of in a top 25 driest such stretch of days, again, from February 1st through March 20th. Now, as a result of what we've seen in terms of the jet stream avoiding specific areas and not producing good moisture, we can look down at that 16-inch level and see where our deficits are. And just want to bring up the same point over and over again, because we're about to see, huge acres go in terms of corn and soybeans in the midsection of the country. And there are a lot of anxious farmers in this area just because of the deficits we've currently got in our soil moisture. But it is not to ignore, like this part of the Southern Plains, and especially this part of the Mid-Atlantic getting down here to the Carolinas. We've got to get more moisture in place, and I do think this pattern is going to help relieve both of these areas. So we're going to get in and see what that looks like in a few moments. So here's the big idea. This is the newest update from the artificial intelligence forecast from the ECMWF, and it's a 10-day total precipitation outlook. And what we see here is that coast to coast, save just a few areas, are expected to be much above average in terms of precipitation. So part of the high and western plains and this large area of the Canadian prairie, and maybe a little bit right into this part here of eastern Canada, eastern Great Lakes, into this section of the Ohio Valley, although I'm not too concerned about that overall. But if we zoom in here on the southeast, this is what the artificial intelligence forecast model is putting out for us for the next 10 days. With the systems, I think we got 4 of them stacked up through the first week of April. Between now and then, we have the potential for grabbing, as you can see in the numbers here, 1 to 2 plus inches overall. We're going to take a look at the probabilities of that soon, but overall, that's kind of the bigger news I've got for you here in the near term. Very, very persistent and unblocked and, kind of active pattern. So let's take a look at what we need to be paying attention to in the near term. I'm going to take you back to yesterday on Thursday. This is the sun was setting here, because we did see yesterday, if we kind of just take this back, there were some larger fires up here in Virginia, but in this animation, I've got it honed in on Ag South territory. And I see some fire smoke here and here, some in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and then another one right here, almost to the coast. And so this was, most of these were prescribed burns, but with the windy conditions we had, some of those winds were kind of in the right direction to allow this to be done. So I thought you might like to see that. You can already see all the cloud cover, yesterday on Thursday that was to your west, and this is what it looked like late in the afternoon. Pretty sizable storm system that spent over a week in Arizona, finally moving out here into the Southern Plains. And had some pretty big storms behind this. A few of these were severe warned. Some of them were hailers. They're pretty nasty storms. And also, look how deep the convection is down here into the Gulf of Mexico. Well, this particular setup is not going to have any trouble finding moisture for us over the next couple of days. And here we are looking at this on Friday. Big high pressure cell off to just off to our east, off the coast. You can see where that low is going to be, here early in the morning on Friday. And it's really pulling in quite a bit of moisture. So we're going to watch this first one roll up the east coast. It's going to join up with another system that brought in some snow to parts of the northern plains, and it's eventually going to hit the northeast pretty hard. But then look what's behind it. We're just stacked up in the Pacific with another system here and another system here, and there's even another one baking all the way over here by Japan that's going to be coming through too. All of it running over the top of this high pressure cell that's sitting north of Hawaii. That's kind of the catalyst for this near-term flow. So let me just kind of give you some big things to think about. I've kind of mentioned better moisture coming in place. We looked at the artificial intelligence model. This is the 10-day probability of an inch. And all of Ag South territory has a 90 to 100% chance of getting at least an inch. Let's step it up from there, though, and have a look at the probability of 2 inches. And now we start to see this 50 to 80+% range in here, given these next systems that are going to be rolling through and potentially putting down quite a bit of rainfall. Now, unlike what we saw earlier in this week with the very, very cold air that dropped that freeze all the way down here, patchy frost, I should say, all the way down to the Florida Panhandle, we're going to miss a lot of the sustained cold air with the way this pattern is set up. So that means all the snow is going to stay really far to the north, but there's going to be a lot of it. We're thinking that between Montana, the Dakotas, Minnesota, and Wisconsin, that of the next 3 to 4 systems that come through, which are going to continue to hit this same area, this is going to be potential of adding more than a foot of snow, some places even more than that. And look at the whole of the Western Mountains. I mean, being able to pick up here an extra foot to 2 to 3 feet this late in the season. I mean, this goes all the way through Sunday. This is Easter. This is through Easter. And you can see just the heavy snows coming through here. Another round of heavy snow for California, which is currently drought free, and some much needed snow in the Pacific Northwest. But take a look at New England. I don't know if any of you are planning on going up there for Easter, but there's going to be some huge snows here in the interior of New England as well. So I just want to bring this to your attention because it is changing so much about what we think this pattern is capable of doing here at the end of March and beyond. So we need to get into some of the details. So I'm going to pick this up early here on Friday morning, about 5 a.m., and we're going to watch that system roll through, drawing in all that moisture from that high pressure cell here, and it starts raining through the middle of the day. It starts first in Georgia and then moves through us. There's going to be some locally embedded thunderstorms. Right now, the severe threat is not high with this system, but it's going to be a soaker throughout the day here on Friday, getting into early Saturday morning as that low curls into New England. Now, this short-term forecast model just shows us when the moisture gets out of here Saturday night into early Sunday morning, like we said, but it's what's behind it that's going to hit us again, and then what's behind that that's going to hit us a third time, and believe it or not, there's even a fourth one that's lined up with all of that. So we better go in there and have a quick look at it. First thing that's kind of interesting, though, is I told you you're not getting much cold air with this, but where the coldest air is, we're going to be hitting this region, which really needs some late season snow to make up for some of these deficits. And this is going to change the entire ag outlook for this area going into spring because of the recharging of the soil moisture with all of the snow that could get into this area. So I wanted to give you that other dimension on this as we go forward here. All right, let's compare models. I've got the GFS on the left and the European on the right, and we have already seen through this part of the weekend, so that's round number 1 rolling through some locally heavy rains. And then we get into a little bit of a waiting time period. So Sunday into Monday and into early Tuesday, the system's in the midsection of the country. We have kind of a couple of days here of severe weather risk in the central United States, but we're going to get all the way to next Tuesday. After the rain we're going to get today and tomorrow, we're going to get to next Tuesday before we start to see moisture getting into our area. But once we get into Tuesday afternoon and evening, it starts to cross over the Appalachian Mountains. We fill this in by the time we get into Wednesday with some rain. Now, what is interesting about the pattern, I'm kind of rocking back and forth over Tuesday night into Wednesday of next week, is notice how the GFS just clears the coast with the front and doesn't leave a whole lot going on here. The European model actually has a secondary low on the back side of this. It starts to curl up in Georgia and South Carolina next Wednesday into Thursday and possibly gives another round of some pretty good rain. Now, do you notice what the European model is also doing? It's trying to bring some snow here into this part of Virginia, West Virginia, meaning there's going to be some nearby cold air to tap into. But what's following it on the 29th, there's our next system. It's in the midsection of the country. It makes its way over to us around Easter Sunday, and there's system number 4. It's going to impact us the first week of April. So you have a lot coming in the next several days, and I would just encourage you to go to ag-wx.com to look at all these maps and just stay on top of this. Plus, you can get those point forecasts that you know are available there. All right, so let's add it all up. I'm going to use the European model only here. We're going to add up total precip. That's the first round, so let's take an idea on the timing. This is Friday afternoon, getting into the overnight hours, playing into early Saturday morning. That system comes through with the potential between a ½ inch and 1.5 inches of total precip. All right, that one sneaks through. We then wait, right? Monday, Tuesday, there's the next system coming through this, the Delta by Tuesday. Wednesday, we're still waiting, and there it is. By Wednesday night into Thursday, coming across parts of Georgia, hitting the Carolinas, and the operational run is attempting to put down, in addition to what we get this weekend, another inch, 1.5 inches, or 2 inches. It's looking fairly wet out of this whole pattern. But I mentioned the pattern isn't slowing down, and what's great about this is it's just another round of rain to continue to beat back any sort of drought risk as we go forward. In some cases, it's too wet. I can make that argument as well, but I like to see the moisture not practicing avoidance with this area at this point in the season. So here they are. This is all of the systems lined up. You're looking in the blues for the troughs. There's a system coming through us on Friday and Saturday. That trough sneaks through. Here's the big one early next week that goes through the Central Plains. When does it get to us? Remember, the trough there comes next Wednesday, Thursday sneaks through. So we call that, I guess, system number 2. When system number 3 get here, well, this is getting into Saturday before Easter. And as we go through Easter Sunday, it went right from parts of Kansas straight toward Virginia. And system number 4 is right behind it, right here on Monday, April 1st, getting through Tuesday, Wednesday, and by the time we get to the 3rd and 4th of April, that's when our last system from this current grouping of systems is going to come through. And it's a lot. There's a lot that's in this. So what does it look like for that week 2? Well, we're still under the above average precipitation category from the CPC, from the European model, and from the GFS. So you've got 2 chances of rain coming in the next 7 days. Then you have a 3rd one coming on Easter, and then you have a 4th one coming once we get into like the 3rd and 4th. And that's all being captured in this week 2 map that's right here. So that's why when I come back and show you, the probabilities of us getting a lot of precipitation, this only goes through Easter. If I go ahead and add that last system, now you can see that the probabilities of getting 2 inches of rain over the next 2 weeks essentially start to get pretty high here. Now, it's also being echoed by the CPC. They released this on Thursday, suggesting that between the 29th and the 4th, we have a slight risk of very heavy rain here, and also along the coast. I imagine we'll fill all of this in, though, as we continue to forecast. There's also concern that with these systems, it's going to get windy, and this is the latest risk of high winds from the 29th through the 4th. So each of these systems, as they come through, can rapidly deepen the pressure and give us the risk of some stronger winds. Now, here we are after what has been an extremely mild late winter and early spring, right? Save the cold air that came through us earlier in this past week. But overall, this is what our temperature ranks look like from February 1st through March 21st compared to average. And it's been incredibly mild, not just in the Ag South territory, but throughout so much of the Midwest, Upper Midwest, Great Lakes, New England, Northern Plains, in fact, the whole of the plains. The only cooler spot's been the West Coast. So as we think about that, this is what it's been doing in terms of GDDs. We've already planted corn in Texas, and they had plenty of heat to get that to emerge. The problem down here in the lower Mississippi River Valley, there's actually going to be probably some prevent plant acres, believe it or not, on corn because of how wet it's been despite the warmth. But if you take a look at our region, we're sitting somewhere between 40 and 80 GDDs ahead of average because of that warmth. So that was what made this past early week, shock of colder air so important. So where do we see frost coming in the next 7 days? Well, we still have a lot of North Carolina that is normal. It's very normal to still get frost risk in this area. But as it stands, the forecast models are not dropping that frost down into South Carolina or Georgia in the next 7 days. So what are the temperatures doing? Well, let's pick it up on Friday here and just take a look at our highs as we work our way into the weekend. Still a cooler one. Getting into Sunday, still cool. Remember, that's when our moisture's coming through. But then we expect some moderation early next week, back up into the low 60s. But the big system that's rolling through the country next Wednesday, it's got a lot of cloud cover, it's got a lot of rain, and our temperatures do not make a full recovery back to the very warm side for a while. Even out there day 5 through 10, this is what things look like. Possibly a few days of above normal temperatures right along the coast, but overall we're going to be watching the coldest air anchor itself in the central part of North America and stick around there day 10 through 15, which again gets us all the way to about the 4th of April. All right. Now, I kind of went through some of that fast because it's a story that's on repeat, right? There's just system after system after system rolling through the country. I said 4 of them before we get through the first week of April. The big question is, how long does this last? And I want to show you a couple of things here. This is the newest forecast for the month of April put out by the European model. And clearly it has a lot of activity throughout the rest of April, throughout parts of AgSouth territory. In other words, we expect it to continue to stay wetter than average. On the temperature side, that same 30-day time period, we know we have slightly cooler than average conditions here, kind of anchored on the Appalachian Mountains and Blue Ridge Mountains. Now, what's important about this is that I want you to see that after that cooler start to April, we might just have a couple of cool days still left in there. I think the central United States actually goes quickly on a warm-up. And there's some evidence of that based off the MJO movement that would suggest if they get any sort of a window after, April 7th to April 15th, that's when their insurance dates are up and they'll start planting very, very fast here. So watch out for that this particular year. But with all of that being said, I want to talk about some new stuff from the Climate Prediction Center. And I want to compare it. All of the rest of this, except for the last 2 slides, which are about South America. All the rest of this is long range. So ready? Here we go. This was just released on Thursday in the morning. It is the April outlook. And you can see that just like the European model suggested, we've got a better chance of having a wetter than average April. They've gone more mild across the northern tier of the United States. That's certainly not going to be the beginning of April. But I think mid to late April does look something like this in terms of temperatures. You say, well, where do you get that from? I get it from history. We have an El Nino that reached a peak back in December and has been fading ever since, right? And when that happened historically, which is in these years listed across the top, we tended to get this temperature pattern, just mild across the top and a little cooler at times, especially early in the southern plains, but not much of a major deviation from normal on temperatures. What we do know from past is that we tended to be wetter and stormier in April, and certainly we're going to finish March and start April with that view, and we're concerned that what that might mean for just too much water and slowing everything down and not being able to get a lot of progress going. So that is a major concern I have. But does that last into May? What does May typically look like? So I stacked these together. I just pulled up the individual maps for May. This would be the composite precipitation outlook. So all those years put together for May. And to be honest with you, it doesn't really convey much information. You're like, well, is it drier here? No, not really. I mean, to be off by an inch in this area compared to average, it's still plenty of moisture getting into this region. And I certainly think that if I could draw this for us, I think that if we are in this corridor, save the Appalachian Mountains here, we are going to be looking at quite a bit of severe thunderstorm activity as we go into the month of May. On the temperature side of it, again, not a strong signal. The history would say pretty warm west, but near normal slight cool bias across the Great Lakes. But I don't think that's going to be the case this year. I mean, the Great Lakes are completely ice-free, and sometimes they have a lot of ice on them at this point in the year. And we just don't have evidence to overturn the more mild start. So we've looked at April and May. What we now need to do is get a little bit longer than that. And so much of this longer range forecast is going to be based on 3 areas. Let's hit them again. One is going to be El Nino, this whole region in through here, and how these ocean temperatures change, especially where that X is. 2, you know that I've been quite anxious about the hurricane season. If El Nino collapses and goes into La Nina, and we have such warm water here, it won't be hard for there to be African easterly waves that just survive the trip and become storm systems. I think it's an active year for the Gulf. I think it's an active year for the West Atlantic. I don't have a reason right now to tell you not to expect an active hurricane season. And the third area we're going to watch is here. And what we're going to watch for here is if these waters over the next 45 to 60 days get colder and colder, then the risk of drought starting in the plains and moving into the Midwest increases exponentially. If they don't, now listen to me carefully, I am worried about ridging of high pressure over the southeast this summer. And I'm going to make a case for that as I start to work my way toward the end of this. Now, the speed and pace at which El Nino dies, it's actually already gone in my opinion. The Southern Oscillation Index is positive as an example. That's one index we use to measure the El Nino strength. It's already positive, and we've seen the trade winds respond. So what I'm saying is the pace at which it goes back to fully neutral or into La Nina is going to be critical. And take a look at this. This comes from the Bureau of Meteorology. That is out of Australia. And this is their projection through August. They've got full-on into neutral. They're the least aggressive. They're the least out of the large group of forecasting that happens at all these different locations, like the Australians, the Canadians, this would be the Europeans, this would be the Japanese, the French, the United States, and the British. That's where they all sit with ocean temperatures on the El Nino side of things now, but by August they all do this. BOM is the only one going after neutral, and Meteo France is still got El Nino hanging around. But the Canadians, the Japanese, NOAA, and the British are all saying this thing could crash epically quick. And we want to know if that's going to be the case. So here we go. What you've got here is a comparison between two of that suite of models I just showed you. On the left, I have I have a model from NOAA. It's called the CFSV2, pardon me there. And on the right, I have the European model. And I've labeled them for what I want you to watch. You see, NOAA's forecast model drops into super La Nina by fall. And I do not like that for your hurricane season. That, for me, has alarm bells and whistles going off saying we need to be thinking now about what this could mean for the hurricane season. Of course, you all know this, so I'm not telling you anything you don't know. You could have a completely benign hurricane season with half the normal number of hurricanes, but it just takes one to go in the wrong spot. You can also have a hyperactive season and they all miss. So we temper what I just said with that reality. But you've been looking at this for long enough. I'm going to now show you why I want you to look at it. This is the forecast just released, the newest one, from this model, the CFSV2. And what it shows is a 3-month sliding window, April, May, June, July, August, and so on. Here's summer and fall. And what is interesting about this is it's actually got some drier coastal regions going into April, May, and June. It doesn't last, but it has a lot of the central plains and the Corn Belt very wet all the way into New England early. What it does do is take drought out of Mexico into the southern plains by summer. And by full-on summer, July, August, September, it's just bleeding it east. And by August, September, October, it's got a huge area that has a high probability of being drier. And then as we get into fall, there's a competition between a very active hurricane season and what looks to be a lack of flow, just nothing, no systems coming through. Now, is this model an outlier? Yeah, it's an outlier. It's this one. Okay? What about this guy? What about the European model? Or what about other forecasting techniques? We need to go have a look at those. So I'm now going to show you something called the NMME. We've looked at it before, National Multi-Model Ensemble. And let's just go ahead and click on United States precipitation rate. Now look at this. What you get is, in this map I'm about to click on, you're going to get all of these models, there's 8 of them, put together in one composite map. Now, unlike the CFSV2, notice that April, May, June is not dry along the Gulf Coast. Instead, it's pretty stormy and wet through spring. You say, all right, well, what about beyond that? Let's go another season out, which would be May, June, July. Still stormy in the model. There's drought coming up the plains, this side of the Cotton Belt as an example. Then we say, well, all right, what about beyond that? Let's go to season 3, which would be June, July, August. Model still has this area stormy and wet. And it's an artifact of the model. I'm going to just tell you that right now, even though this is what the model is up to, we have to assess what kind of pattern could even get us there. And does it make sense consistently with history? Because, okay, I see the really active hurricane season. See all the greens down here? But this drought making this migration pattern, this would suggest some sort of large ridge in the midsection of the country. In other words, getting the atmosphere to do something like big omega block, and you stay stormy. I'm not convinced that the pattern is going to be capable of doing that this year, and I kind of want to make a case for why that is. So one of the neat things that happens is in the middle of every month, there's a group at Columbia University that takes that NMME and applies a statistical algorithm to basically recalibrate the output to reduce error. And this is its April, May, June forecast. So what we see here is no major drought along the Gulf Coast or here yet, but it's dry in Mexico, getting into the Four Corner states. What about going beyond that, May, June, July? What's interesting about this statistical processing of the dynamical models is that it starts to paint a drier spot in the mid-Atlantic, but not over Ag South territory, even for June, July, and August. And then once you get out there into July, August, September, yeah, it definitely has the active hurricane season. But if there's a signal, it seems to be Great Basin, or it seems to be in the plains late in the summer where the risk of drought begins to show up. And I say, well, is summer going to be a hot one? Now remember, when I show you this map, it's a probability map. So you can't look at that and go, holy cow, it's going to be crazy hot. Well, at this point, it seems as though the greatest heat will be in the Great Basin, according to this model. All right, what else do we have? Let's now go look at the European model. Now the European model, this is March, April, May, June. Dryness is here coming out of Mexico. May, June, July. I still don't see anything alarming here. You're like, wait, it's got patches. No, it doesn't. I mean, this is just noise. Then you get out there, June, July, August. It's suggesting a bit drier in this area, but I still don't see anything that's alarming to me. This would actually suggest we'd get more storm systems in the plain, or excuse me, more high pressure systems in the plains. You know what that does? If you put high pressure here and the flow goes around it, you end up getting flow that comes in from the jet here, goes right off the mountains in Montana, and what it does is it builds storms, and those storms just line their way out until they get all the way to the southeast. That's what this is advertising. So we get through all of that, and we want to arrive at two other ways, and then I will be done. This is the new stuff that just came out for the Climate Prediction Center. Go to it, cpc.ncep.noaa.gov. And when you get there, they talk about a couple things like the probability of neutral conditions by spring or even La Nina by summer is pretty high right now. But what you can do when you get to the site is I want you to hover over the 3-month, that word 3-month outlook, or phrase, and click it. And you'll be actually taken to their official forecasting maps. Now, let's go through them real quick. How about the April, May, June precipitation probabilities? So this is from our government. They're wet. Where are they dry? This side of the Cotton Belt. Let's go from there to May, June, July. Still above average on better chances of being wet. What about June, July, August? I still see it. They're following the European solution, I think, pretty carefully here, with maybe a little bit of the NMME, which has taken the dryness here in late summer. But they do not have you getting away from wet. In fact, this would be the beginning of hurricane season, and they're going after pretty, overall wet conditions. Now, everything I just showed you in the long range comes from a forecasting model. Okay, so this is run on a supercomputer, and it generates a long range forecast, and things are averaged, and this is what you get. What I want to do to finish this is I want to give you a different look. If I go back and I choose every single year where El Nino peaked at Christmas and was done by spring, and even faded into La Nina by fall, these are the years. In April to October, what was concerning about those years was that many of those years we had drought anchored right here along the Delta. Some of those years it was in the Western Plains. A couple of those years, like 2016, which is not a year we want a repeat of, it was right over Atlanta. But the reality of it was that inside that oval is where these years most commonly put down their driest conditions. That's what happened April to October. I can show you a little different version of that, but just take you strictly to summer. June through August, we tended to be warmer than average, actually quite warmer than average in the Ohio Valley. A lot of storms tend to roll through the Corn Belt. Many of them finished in the Carolinas. We were a bit drier in June through August in part of Ag South territory throughout Georgia. But you put them all together, still not a major major signal for drought, right? So this is the one year I'm worried about. The most recent time period where we came off of El Nino and went into La Nina was 2016. And that year anchored a massive ridge of high pressure over Atlanta. And that was the year, by the way, do you remember the fires in Gatlinburg in Tennessee? That was the year. And a lot of that heat and dryness came on late, but I'm just concerned about that year as one of my analog years. So what do you do with all of this? Well, you notice the models kind of have a similar path to them, right? They all kind of gave us a similar solution. And the analogs are a little different, but it's not like it's a major deviation from normal. What I'm going to tell you is I feel like for Ag South territory, the model performance, which in the past is not exactly the best thing to go with, I would just tell you that because I'm concerned from the high plains to the mid-south to the southeast for drought, we need to be thinking about this as a possibility that we've had all this moisture, we have more that's coming in, and once we get into May and June, we have to be very careful to watch the position of the Bermuda High. If it slides over to Atlanta, which is why I've left you on this slide, I think we have concern. Okay? Watch the Bermuda, let me rephrase that. I'm going to watch the Bermuda High and I'm going to tell you about it. That Bermuda High position is going to be critical this year. Okay, one last thing just to show you, one more slide to click on. It's this global update on precip. It is wet in across parts of China, very wet in northern Australia where there's a tropical system that's still sitting and spinning. We finally got some rain down into South Africa. Much of Western Europe has decent moisture and no major dry signals around the Black Sea. But this little stripe of rain right in through here is mission critical to the success of the safrinha corn crop. Now, historically, we tend to get drier later in April before the monsoon's supposed to shut down when you have an El Nino. But heavy rains moving into this area right now, I could largely blame it on the position of the MJO sweeping over to phases 7 and 8 soon. But overall, we look at that and say that that's a huge drink for a crop that was struggling a bit on moisture. So we'll watch South America too and keep you updated. But thanks for hanging around for a longer video. But we had a lot to cover today, and we'll talk again next week. Thanks.